Well, good morning. It appears that here we are, we're on the air, and it always takes me a bit by surprise. There are one or two buttons that if you push, it actually makes you freeze. In fact, because of this heat, I suppose I'm not frozen. I'm going, and 26 seconds into the morning. So good morning, and good to have you with us. I know that I've got all of now 2 listeners, but hopefully we'll build that as time goes by. Because I think that we do have some interesting things to talk about in the morning, for some people anyway. Some people will be left quite stone cold by what I talk about, but basically we serve from Battle to Brighton. And things that happen in that area, we very much want to hear about, we very much want to discuss, and we very much want to make sure that there is good debate, and that we hold our governments, our leaders, the people who we elect to lead us, to account, to make sure they do lead us and not just go down a very easy road and doing everything that they're told to do by the lobbies or the government, the national government. By the same token, we don't be parochial either, so we do actually bring in people, particularly on our television service. We bring in people from overseas and get their views on things, and it's amazing sometimes the likeness between the problem people 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 miles away are having with the problems that we're having here on the ground in Mirador country, Battle to Brighton. You notice I'm not saying East Sussex, because East Sussex is a bit larger than that, and indeed we would be very happy to cover the whole of East Sussex as time goes by, but we just want to consolidate and establish ourselves with this service straight away. So here we are. Here are the things that I talked about a little earlier. I astonished some people when I put out on television that the red arrows were going to be sold. I didn't actually say the red arrows were going to be sold. I said the red arrows to be sold, question mark. The government has said it's going to sell its base, and that base will be turned into housing. Now, there are 2 issues here, because I wonder about this obsession that we have with building houses, and we are now going on to green sites, into green fields, and that's really not on. To protected land is protected land for future generations, and no government has the right to sort of start to break this, which this government is, and the councils are just going on with them hand in hand. There have got to be alternatives, not least of which there's thousands and thousands of acres of brown sites available, apparently. I'm no statistician, and I don't follow these things carefully and go around and count every green site or brown site or anything else, but those people who do say that building on greenfield sites, particularly on protected land, isn't essential. Anyway, I was talking about the red arrows, and of course they will appear at Eastbourne next weekend, or this weekend, depending on how you use the word this and next. It's always a bit confusing, I know, but anyway, it'll be Thursday, Friday coming. And I just raised the issue because in seeing that they're going to sell the base, first of all, someone, a journalist, posed the question, where are they going to go? And that hasn't been made clear. Secondly, some of the papers, local papers around the base, around the area, have said, is this the thin end of the wedge? Are they going to actually get rid of the red arrows? And one of the options, of course, is to sell them. Is that daft? No, I don't think it is. They're very, very attractive, very famous at it. And, of course, if you want precedent, the Goodyear blimps, Goodyear put all their promotional monies into their blimps. They're lighter than airships, and it worked magnificently for them. For 2 decades, a Goodyear blimp was everywhere to be seen, and the television companies used them to look down onto sporting events and so on. So there is a precedent to use that sort of thing. And secondly, I mean, I know that it wasn't quite the same, but the government flogged off Concorde. They sold it, and it was part of British Airways, yes, when they privatised, but nonetheless, British Airways took it with glee, and it was under Lord King, the flagship emblem and leader of the company as it set out onto brave new world of independence and of privatization and of having to make its own way in the world and not get government money. Anyway, it is a possibility, and finally there is some whispers occasionally that are the red arrows missing from this particular display, and are they missing from that particular display? Okay, it's all spurious. It's all one can only put a case together, but. Unfortunately, you've got me, who is cynical about all forms of government at the moment, probably always will be for the rest of my life now, because I don't think they perform particularly well, not just in this country, but anywhere. And I don't think they're performing particularly well in our part of the world. It would appear that East Sussex County Council is on the verge of going bust. Now, I've had some pretty good analysis from people who wish to remain anonymous, I believe, because they do a very, very good job of investigative journalism, and they send stuff to me and other people from time to time so that we can see their work and use it if we wish. And this particular investigative journalist, and I'm going to call them that, has pointed out that an awful lot of money goes on roads. And why do we insist upon ploughing roads through everywhere? I mean, look, it was devastated New Haven. It could have devastated Lewis. It could have devastated communities along the way. The fact of the matter is there seems an obsession with our governors, our leaders, if we want to call it that, those people that we put into power through the vote, through democracy, to steer things for us, to steer them in through roads and houses. And if you think that I'm a bit mad, well, there's an editorial in one newspaper this morning on that very thing: is why the hell are we building houses on greenfield sites, on protected land? So it's not just me. There are other people that are asking the same question, and I'm always delighted when I find out that some of the things I raise on this program and on my television program that they are reflected by people who are far wiser and far more knowledgeable than I am about what's going on in these various areas. So I'm not too far wide of the mark in wanting to see the green environment saved for future generations. And I go one step further, and people say, Keith, you're stretching. But the more you build, the more you actually get small communities turning into large communities, the more that we will see crime in the streets, despite Cressida Dick saying, she's the commander of the Met, by the way, Cressida Dick saying that she's got everything under control, and then people go and knife one another to death just 24 hours afterwards. But, if we don't have the right environment, we're not going to get the right sort of thinking of youngsters. You need to grow up understanding what a tree is all about and the beauty of the countryside. Doesn't mean to say you can't be urban as well. But this whole business of what we're doing is we're turning sink estates into all sorts of other estates, and the gangs are just loving it. They're just loving it, and it's just spilling over into ordinary life, and that's got to stop. Anyway, that's just Keith peddling on. I am very disappointed that the Priory, the Priory Trust, the Lewis Priory Trust, have had to cancel their candlelight evening. This is a wonderful occasion where hundreds and hundreds of candles are put around the Priory. The Priory being, yes, okay, ruins, but ruins that are very significant, because that's where in 1264 the barons and the king sat and signed an agreement that the barons could have a bit more say in affairs, and is decreed by those who, once again, are much wiser than I, but I agree with them, is that's where democracy started. And the fact that we have a celebration each year, which is absolutely marvellous to go to, it's just wonderful. I mean, it's sorry, Glyndebourne is better than Glyndebourne, and it's cheaper. You take a picnic and you sit outside and you get a nice little concert, and you have a jolly good evening, but it's also one of those evenings which takes you back to the start of the democratic process, sitting amongst the ruins where it did all start. And I'm really sorry that hasn't taken off. And the reason it hasn't is because they can't find volunteers. Now, Lewis, come on. You're a volunteer-type town. You volunteer for all sorts of things. We've seen off the bad guys by volunteers who are willing to take to the streets and protest. But with this one, it was to support the good guys, and we didn't seem to be very interested in it. I'm very sorry about that. I hope that they will either put something else up before the end of the year, which we can all prove that they were wrong, and that we will support these things. And secondly, I hope that we'll get cracking now to think about this time next year and make sure that it is a glorious event. It must not die. So my obsession with television and radio and also with the wonderful issue of democracy is it all comes together, and I think that the democratic process which started here should be followed by us with our support. Because if we lose sight of those sort of evenings and those sort of occasions when we're reminded of what democracy is all about, is then I'm afraid that our present democratic system will overwhelm us. It is threatening to already, in my opinion, and I think we've just got to fight back. Come on, Lewis, you're fighters. And for that matter, because we like to think that we are supporting, and slowly we are, the towns from Battle to Brighton. Come on, Battle. Come on, Brighton. Come on, Lewis. Come on, Seaford. Come on, Eastbourne. Come on, Uckfield. Come on, Falmer. Get behind this and make sure that this is the one thing that does actually keep on going, that it is saved, because there is all sorts of reminders of the Cluniac Priory in many towns around here. For instance, the church on the hill in Newhaven is in direct line of sight to the Priory, and was built by the Priory, by the monks. And there are all sorts of connections with all of your towns from this Priory. Don't let it stop. Please give a great deal of support to the Priory Trust. Burning Gap is falling down, a great big chunk of rock. Pity that it has. One of the things I would say is be very careful. This proves that just how dangerous it is when people go and decide to have a selfie or so on, standing on the very edge of the cliff. Nobody remembers you from a selfie, you know. You'd risk your life, and if you're taken life, nobody will say, oh gosh, weren't they daring, weren't they brave, it wasn't foolhardy. And I'm sorry, it just appealed to me this morning, the Cockle Pickers. The Cockle Pickers were arrested, a whole group of them in Lewis. Now, I'm laughing because it just struck me as very peculiar, very nice. You know, the Cockle Pickers were arrested. And if they were arrested for being a Cockle Pickers, I would have said, what are the police doing, wasting their time? But they weren't. They were illegal immigrants who were doing that work. And I think that it's unfortunate because I bet you they were paid very probably by the pint of cockle, and not very much. So perhaps it was absolutely right and proper that the police intervened on various levels. But it just appealed to me. The Cockle Pickers have been arrested. Well, I've tried to get in as much as I possibly can this morning. There's not a great deal really going on in the rest of the world. I say that because there are lives are being lost and bombs have been thrown and so on and so forth. But in some ways, I like to think that we just talk about those things nationally and internationally that impact upon us. Interest rates, yeah, well, we're going to watch that. So I expect throughout the week I shall have a go at the banks. I shall have a go at the council, both of them. I shall have a go at various institutions, and certainly I'll have a go at the rail. Apparently, Saturday night in Brighton was chaotic as a result of the Gay Pride festivities and holidaymakers and so on. But you know, why aren't they planning for that? Each year we hear about how the trains are chaotic, and why don't the authorities get together and try to plan? It could be avoided. It could. All right, that's it for this morning. Keith Hayes, good morning.